G'day you mob, Pete here, and this is another episode of Aussie English, the number one place for anyone and everyone wanting to learn Australian English. So today I have a Goss episode for you where I sit down with my old man, my father, Ian Smissen, and we talk about the week's news, whether locally down under here in Australia or non-locally overseas in other parts of the world. Okay, and we sometimes also talk about whatever comes to mind, right? If we can think of something interesting to share with you guys related to us or Australia, we also talk about that in the Goss. So these episodes are specifically designed to try and give you content about many different topics where we're obviously speaking in English and there are multiple people having a natural and spontaneous conversation in English. So it is particularly good to improve your listening skills. In order to complement that though, I really recommend that you join the podcast membership or the academy membership at aussieenglish.com.au, where you will get access to the full transcripts of these episodes, the PDFs, the downloads, and you can also use the online PDF reader to read and listen at the same time. Okay, so if you really want to improve your listening skills fast, get the transcript, listen and read at the same time, keep practicing, and that is the quickest way to level up your English. Anyway, I've been rabbiting on a bit. I've been talking a bit. Let's just get into this episode, guys. Smack the bird, and let's get into it. So, how's the week been, Dad? How you going?
Yeah, good. Hang on, I've got to control this beer. I don't know what...
Oh, it's okay.
Cranky Misses, it's actually okay. Cranky Misses Double IPA from Salt Brewing Company in Aireys Inlet, Victoria. Shout out to them. If you want to sponsor this show, please get in contact.
It. I was confused for a long time when IPA seems to mean quite a few different things, like International Phonetic Alphabet.
Yes.
Indian Pale Ale.
Yeah.
But it's not called an Indian Pale Ale because it's from India, right?
No, it's because it was for taking to India.
Yep.
Back in the days when, in the early British colonisation of India, they wanted to ship beer out there because it was easier than water, funnily enough, because it would keep better on ships. And the only way they could keep it without it going off, as in getting bacterial infections, if you can get a bacterial infection in a beer.
You can. That's what we call it when we're doing the whiskey stuff.
Exactly, because the bacteria is actually affecting the quality of the product in the end.
Well, it competes with the yeast to get the alcohol or to get the sugar, but it also creates other congeners and esters that are gross.
Exactly. And toxins in there. The reason they called it Indian Pale Ale is because and we look at it here, and this is actually quite a dark beer. It's not
if you could actually see through the brown glass.
Yeah. Is because it was paler than a traditional British ale, which is quite flat and not exactly sweet, but not bitter. And so they increased the hops in it, and increasing the hops acted as a preservative.
Yeah.
So the beer would last a lot longer, which meant the 3 or 4 months that it took to get around to India 250 years ago, meant that the beer would survive.
Yeah.
So that's where Indian Pale Ale comes from. But this one is a double IPA. I think double, the first I actually means nothing. But what it means
just means
is
it's stronger than a usual IPA.
And I think what they didn't want to put was DIPA because it just sounded ridiculous.
Dipper.
It means it's double strength. So it's typically double strength in hops and double strength in alcohol. Hang on, what have we got? 2.2 standard drinks in this, which means it's about 8% alcohol, which as opposed to your normal beer, which is 4 to 4.5 in Australia.
Oh, yeah, far out.
Unlike the rat's piss that they drink in America.
They love their cheap beers, right?
Yeah.
And they think
some of them are great. Don't get me wrong. Some of the best beers I've ever had have been in North America, but the standard big brand beers over there are about 2.5-3% alcohol, and they taste like rat's piss. Not that I've ever drunk rat's piss.
Budweiser.
Yes.
Bud Light.
And there's a bunch of Canadian ones as well. But,
all right, man. So
I'm not mentioning cause.
First story that came up was Australian Philanthropists spending big and fast to fight catastrophic climate change. So this was a cool article, and I guess sort of to give you the rundown there, I'll just give you the points that I've got here. Jeff and Julie Wicks, when they retired, decided that they had more than enough to live on and they wanted to give the rest away. I think they had no children either.
Yeah,
so they were kind of like, well, there's no point. We can't take it with us. What did I hear the other day? Someone was like, you can't there's no tow bar on a hearse.
Yeah,
So
exactly.
you can't put a trailer full of
You can't take
stuff.
all your stuff with you.
Yeah, exactly. Although the pharaohs thought they could.
Well, yeah.
Including other people.
Including other people. Yeah, they took all their slaves with them. Yeah.
Anyway, so they've set up a private philanthropic foundation, one of 1,600 that are around in Australia, and they're giving away 10 times more than what they live on every single year for the next decade or so. And the interesting thing here is that they, as well as a few of the others that we'll go through, setting it up not to last forever, but to spend down.
Yes.
So that they spend more in the short term, but they're killing all of the, the ability for it to maintain its size and the money that comes out of it.
They are.
Because they want to get as much done as possible for climate change in the next decade.
Yeah, and during their lifetime, I think, so that they can actually see what's happening to it. Because if you create a philanthropic fund that is going to pull 5% off a year or whatever so that you actually maintain the balance, then you're not having a big hit in any one go. And typically those sort of trusts are set up for things like scholarships and so on. So
the Nobel Prize would be an example, right?
Exactly. You know how much you're going to pull out every year to achieve what you want to achieve. So all you need is a balance that's going to, typically in an average year, although who knows what an average year is this year. We've worldwide interest rates are so low that you effectively can't just stick it in a bank and rely on the balance being maintained. So that actually makes sense in their case as well, is to, spend it up now because you're not going to earn any money on it by investing.
But it's also pressing, right? The issue is pressing, time sensitive. We had Sue and John McKinnon, who are running a similar foundation to where they're planning to give away $10 million over 10 years, and they originally aimed to continue it into the future, but decided that they wanted their legacy to be mainly the climate change fight. And they recently helped that the lawyer David Barnden, who was representing, I believe, a 25-year-old Brisbane man who sued Rest, the superannuation fund Rest, over its climate change disclosures. So I don't know the story too intricately, but I have a feeling that Rest had obviously said it was doing more than it really was. Yeah,
I think they were making, and this is just disclaimer here, I've read the story ages ago and I can't remember the detail, but from memory, I think it was they were making claims of only investing in environmentally friendly corporations and funds.
Yeah.
And it turned out that some of those were owning coal and stuff like that.
Well, now they've been...
Not the specific is not necessarily the case, but...
Well, now they've been forced, I think, after this case, to make sure that they commit to net zero emissions for all investments by 2050.
Yeah.
So that happened. Then we had Norman Peter, who wants to spend $40 million in the next 10 years. And this was the sort of coolest story that I liked out of it. He, and I assume his wife, I believe, have obviously a lot of money, and they plan to revegetate biodiversity. So they've gone, I think most recently they went to WA, to the wheat belt, and they bought up a bunch of these farms that were something like 2,000 hectares.
Yeah, and these are farms that people are effectively walking away from and selling because they can't be productive on them at the moment.
Because of the drought and everything.
Because of the drought and look, the farming industry across Australia over the last 10 years, because of the sort of cycling of droughts around the country, has really struggled, and a lot of old family farms have had to have just been sold up because people can't afford them. So I think this is one example where they've purchased land that was no longer going to be used for farming, and are going to do something else with it rather than trying to maintain a farming thing. Not there's anything wrong with farmers, but... Well,
it is getting more and more expensive, and you have that interesting thing of, like, say, down here on the Bellarine Peninsula, suburbia is kind of encroaching on farmland, and so the rates keep going up as the councils decide we want to rezone these areas, so that if you wanted to keep
the population's booming down here. When we moved down, even Ocean Grove, the town that we live in, when we moved down here, I think the resident population was about 8,000 people. About 12,000 people owned houses, because half the houses here were holiday houses. But now the population's over 15,000. It's doubled in the time that we've been here. Not to mention during
summertime.
Well, summer it goes up to 50,000, peaking over that Christmas New Year period, and then the Australia Day holiday at the end of the school holidays.
So this guy, Norman Peter, is planning to, I think he wants to buy up 1 million hectares. He's just bought up 2,000 hectares, and it is part of his carbon farming foundation. So the plan is to revegetate it, so plant as many trees as will fill up the land, and I assume native trees. And then he is trying to make it profitable for people to effectively farm nature, where they just have the land, and then I don't know how the money works, but I would imagine that either companies need to buy offsets, or the government may have grants or pay for certain amounts of CO2 tonnage to be pulled out of the atmosphere every year. And so I think he was saying that the farmers currently get $16 a ton of CO2 that they pull out per year, which is apparently $10 a ton short before it becomes feasible.
Yeah.
And so we would have to put some things into place. But yeah, I just thought it was really cool that there are a lot of these obviously well-off to very wealthy people that are willing to give away large amounts of their fortune, to the point of all of their fortune, that isn't going to impinge upon their ability to live and retire.
Yeah, well, and we talked about, apologies, I can't remember his name, one of the wealthiest miners in Australia, who at the end of the bushfire season last summer just donated $75 million to investigating bushfire hazard and what we can do about it.
I know the guy you're talking about.
Yeah.
See if I can...
Sorry, it was just... But that's another example of somebody who just says, I've got more than enough money to live on. I'm never going to need to be cheap with my money.
It'll be Andrew Forrest, right?
It was Andrew Forrest,
Andrew Forrest.
Ironic name.
I love it. I just type in Australia miner billionaire, and it's just Andrew Forrest.
So Andrew Forrest, and a few tens of millions is not going to put a dent in his bank balance. But at the same time, he's doing something where he's just said, we need to do something straight away. So let's throw tens of millions of dollars at research into bushfires and what we can do to mitigate against them, because it's all very well to recover from them, but what can we do that'll reduce the chance of bushfires? A lot of which is climate change.
Well, they're interrelated,
and they're obviously interrelated. But there are forest management, and even just the way bushfires are fought. Can we do more preventative work up front? Can we fight bushfires in a particular way that is not going to mean that we're really just trying to hold them from getting, from going crazy? So, there's a lot of good stuff being done. One of the other things that I heard of recently, and I don't know any specific names, but there seems to be a movement now of people who, particularly those who are going to leave property in their estate, with no inheritance, so they're not, they don't have children or anybody to inherit.
As in, they're not giving it away to someone else's name.
Yeah, they're leaving their land to the government with a covenant on it that it has to remain as natural bushland, or to be revegetated. They're leaving money to revegetate as natural bushland, and incorporating those into state parks, national parks, and so on. So that it's effectively saying, what we are doing is giving our land away to the government, and they can never do anything else with it.
Yeah.
In order to accept those sort of things, you have to accept the covenant on them. So that's another interesting way that people are starting to effectively leave a legacy to the environment when they go.
Well, I've just typed in here, Norway, $1 billion donation to Brazil for protecting its rainforest.
Yeah.
Which was a cool sort of similar thing where obviously Norway's looking around and kind of like, well, we can't really do much here in our own country, but we can invest this money into other countries to try and encourage them to maintain the forest that they do have. Although at the moment in Brazil, they're probably having a bit of trouble with Bolsonaro and the deforestation that's occurring there.
Yes, but if the Norwegian government, for instance, are effectively buying that up as private land, then that doesn't give the government of Brazil the right to do what they want with it.
Well, the government won't.
They will take it anyway, but
the government won't. But they have a lot of issues with just illegal logging.
Yeah, exactly.
Where they just go in and strip the place and then come out and they don't own the land. Yeah. But the sort of question and the thing I wanted to end this episode chatting about was responsibility with answering climate change, because we've obviously got many different levels here where you've got the individual, whether rich or poor, you've got corporations, you've got the government, and then just society as a whole. Where do you think the buck stops at any individual one of those, or at all of them?
Well, I think there are elements of all of them. If we're going to be serious about stopping climate change, it's all very well for me as a sort of left-wing greenie for the last 60 plus years, although probably 50 plus years.
60 plus, my
you political
were 3 and you're like,
I was waving a greenie flag. Tying myself to trees, which I probably was doing at 3, but not for that reason. I think, as individuals, we can do our own little bit.
Yeah.
But if we're going to be making those statements of saying the government should, corporations should, and so on, then we've got to start doing things as well. And some of that is investing in and or purchasing environmental or climate friendly products.
Yeah.
Buying our electricity from companies that are investing in I keep using the term, and I think we'd mentioned last time that people keep saying renewable energy, but wind power and solar power is not renewable. The wind doesn't come back, and the solar energy doesn't come back. It's effectively endless.
It's more like free energy, right?
It's free energy, except for the technology to extract it. But so I think those sort of things, because realistically, yes, I could say, well, now it's a bit of I could put my hat on and say, I'm not going to fly overseas for the next 2 years because I don't want to do that, but I'm not going to fly overseas for the next 2 years anyway because of the COVID experience.
We've all been forced.
Exactly. Yeah. And funnily enough, we've got plenty of examples around the world at the moment where just general air pollution has reduced significantly.
Well, they saw that in China during the lockdown, and India, I think, during their lockdown too.
Where they're locking people down so there aren't as many cars and trucks on the road, and therefore there's less air pollution. So, and
maybe we just
visual
need to
air
do
pollution
this every year. We'll have 1 year on, 1 year off. Yeah,
and look,
sorry, economy.
But some of those things are, and I know that I think it was the RACV and the NRMA, two of our big automotive clubs, effectively. So you belong to the RACV in Victoria, the Royal Automobile Club of Victoria, which typically used to be that you're effectively buying insurance for breakdowns.
Yeah.
So if you broke down, they would come out and get your car running again and tow it to the nearest service station so you get it fixed, that sort of thing. But they've become much bigger. They're the biggest clubs in Australia. The two of them, the New South Wales one, the NRMA, and I can't remember the exact acronym, but it's not an acronym because it's not a word.
It won't be RACV or whatever it is over there. It'll be RAC-NSS.
NSW. But between the two of them, they've got millions of members.
Yeah.
So, and you pay anything from $100 to a couple of $100 a year, depending on the level of cover you want. But they do a lot of work into research into traffic modelling and best cars to buy and these sort of conditions and so on. But there was a study done by both of them a few years ago looking at the difference in traffic flow over school holidays when there is only about a 10% reduction in the number of people who are driving to and from work and taking kids to and from school and so on. But Melbourne and Sydney are the two biggest and most congested cities in Australia.
Sydney more than Melbourne, right?
Well, it's arguable. Sydney, I think, has got an artificial congestion because the centre of Sydney struggles with the harbour, so that you don't have as much entry and exit to the city, and also the streets are narrow and windy and so on. But anyway, it doesn't particularly matter which one's the worst to drive in. I'd say Melbourne was the worst to drive in because Melbourne drivers are assholes. Sydney drivers seem to be nice because they're driving in narrower streets.
Or because we've got hook turns, right?
Yeah, we've got all sorts of bizarre...
You need to pull onto the wrong side of the road, wait for the traffic to pass. You pull on the left side of the road to turn right. And then turn,
all that sort of stuff. But that aside, 10% reduction was about a 30% reduction in time to travel. And so that sort of thing means, and a 10% reduction, all that means is that regardless of school holidays, if every person had the opportunity of working from home once a fortnight, once every 2 weeks, then we would have that 10% reduction. So it's not just faster travel time, but it means less pollution and so on. So those sort of things are going to happen. And I think we've got to the point now with our experience in COVID that a lot of people can work from home that previously didn't think they could. Definitely. So that's at that individual level, back to your...
When you wonder how much corporations are going to take from that
And that's the next thing, is that corporations can say, apart from just having the family-friendly thing of being able to work from home, to say, we're going to allow our people to work from home.
It can be a gift and a curse.
Oh, yeah.
It can be a gift and a curse in terms of productivity and distraction.
Yeah, exactly. But then if you... Like, I was working in Melbourne, living down here, and that was 4 or 5 hours of travel a day. Yeah. Even if we had the 10% reduction, which meant it was faster, it'll be 3.5 or 4 hours a day.
You just get to listen to podcasts like Aussie English.
Aussie English, and I read a lot of books, I claim, but I actually had a lot of other people reading books.
We need another verb, I think, for that, for audiobooks, because it sounds weird to say listen to an audiobook.
I listened to a book. Yeah.
But also people will say, have you read this? And I'm like,
I go,
well,
no, I had someone else read to me.
Yeah, exactly.
Which actually, in some cases, depending on the actor, performer, narrator, can enhance the experience.
Oh, 100%.
Yeah. But anyway, so I think there's that corporate thing. But then obviously corporations have that, we are going to do things in an environmentally friendly way.
Yeah.
But then coming back to government, I think the government is ultimately the biggest hammer that we have.
Yeah.
And we need governments to actually come in and say, we are going to have a long-term view of this. We're going to commit to things in 2030, 2040, 2050 and beyond, rather than saying, oh, we can't afford to do this right now, because right now is always the problem for government. Particularly in Australia, where we only have 3-year terms for federal government, which means they get 1 year of electioneering, they get elected, they get 1 year of breaking the promises that they did, they get the middle year of actually trying to do something, and then they're back into election mode. So if we have governments that are going to say, we're going to commit to something over a 20, 30, 50-year time and make sure that they set up practices and procedures and policies to enable that to happen, then that's how we're going to solve the problem. We're never going to solve the problem by government saying we're going to do this now. What we have to have them say is we're going to do this little bit now, but commit to it over a long period of time.
Do you think rich people or people who are well off and have more money than they need in order to live a good quality life after retirement, and I mean, I guess that's kind of subjective, do you think that they bear more responsibility than the average person, making an average income or less? Or do we all have an equal responsibility irrespective of how much money you have?
We all have an equal responsibility, but we don't all have the equal capability of doing something about it, certainly financially. We can all change our behaviour, but if Bill Gates changes his behaviour, it probably doesn't affect anybody more than me changing my behaviour.
This became, sorry to interrupt you, to get to the sort of point where I feel like you're going. I think I remember learning ethics at university, and I think it was Peter Singer who brought up the whole, there's a sort of, I guess the libertarian argument of, imagine you're walking past a dam or a body of water and there's a boy drowning. Is it unethical to just keep walking? If you could save that boy, but because it's not you, if you kept walking, do you bear any responsibility? And I guess the parallel I'm trying to draw here is that if you are someone who is incredibly rich and have much more than you need, and it's effectively no skin off your nose,
if you have the capability
to try and make a difference or to help someone or to save lives.
And climate is just one thing. And I use Bill Gates as an example, and the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation has invested billions, tens to hundreds of billions of dollars over the last 20 years, mostly into disease control. Major disease control, like AIDS and malaria.
I'm sure what he would have done is, I'm getting filthy rich, and I have more money than I'm ever going to spend in my entire lifetime, especially on affluent stuff, which I doubt. I don't know Bill Gates very well, but by the sounds of it, by the way he's portrayed... I don't actually know him
at all. But
well, yeah.
Exactly.
By the way that he's portrayed, he doesn't seem like the kind of guy who's like, I want a Ferrari, I want a really big mansion. He's not the
Even if
kind
he
of,
does, buying a Ferrari and a really big mansion is nothing in comparison with the billions of dollars that just keep pouring into his personal bank account.
But I imagine that gets to a point where you're kind of like, the guilt, the elephant in the room that's going to be behind me or on my shoulders permanently if I don't start doing something because I have the ability to, right? Like walking past that dam and seeing a boy drowning, screaming help, and you're like, I'm a professional swimmer.
Yeah, I'm a lifesaver, but I'm late for a date.
Exactly. So I would literally just have to go pop and then pull him out, and it would be no skin off my nose, and I just jog up and keep going.
So I think there is that, and I like the example because I think there is that moral responsibility that, let's face, most of us actually have. I remember
to try and
do what we are capable of doing.
I imagine that he just looked at the plethora of things that are affecting humanity and just said, which is the one that I can have the greatest effect on alleviating suffering or reducing the number of people dying. And so it was like malaria, AIDS, malnutrition. Bam, that's the hill I'll die on.
Yeah, exactly. And look, and this is a fictional example, but there's an episode in The West Wing, one of my favourite American TV shows.
He's probably mentioned it on here before.
I probably have. I'll mention it again. Where one of the characters is looking at, this is coming towards the end of the presidency, and one of the characters in there is looking at, well, what do I do now? I'm no longer going to be working in the White House. And she's looking for alternative jobs, and this fictional, extremely wealthy person just wants to interview her. And his pitch is, what if you had endless resources, what would you like to do? And she came up with a couple of things. And he said, all right, what if I gave you $1 billion? What do you think you could do? And she went, oh.
Yeah.
and that's the sort of thing. Yeah, for him, again, a fictional example, but and as your example with Bill and Melinda Gates, if you've got billions of dollars, throwing a few $1 billion at something makes a huge difference in comparison with me donating a few $100s to the local life-saving club or to the Red Cross or to one of those things.
It must be a weird position to be in where you must almost feel like a bit of a wizard, right? Where you have the ability to just make the problem of thousands, potentially millions of people just go away.
Yeah.
Of
the two biggest killers in Africa.
Yeah.
He I'm sure just looked at this and said, we're not going to solve this, but we can certainly alleviate it.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. Well, and that's why I get irritated with people shitting on people like Bill Gates, because you're kind of like, look, you just hate him because he's rich. You hate him because you don't like capitalism, although you have an iPhone and all these other things.
Exactly.
Whereas, at the end of the day, he's doing as much as I imagine he can do or is in a position to do to try and save people's lives.
Yeah.
Because he's in a position to do it, and so what else do you want from him? What else should he do? Should he just give the money to you?
Yeah.
Like, who's more important? People in, countries that are suffering from this sort of disease that you don't suffer from?
There is that element, too, of saying Bill Gates is only earning that sort of money because he is a major shareholder in one of the world's biggest companies that he started. It's the same thing with Apple or Google. Now, Apple's a bit different because the two founders of Apple are no longer there. But those sort of people, and Steve Jobs while he was alive, in the case of Apple, but any of those people who have got huge corporations that they have started themselves, it's not like they can suddenly go, oh, well, I'm just going to give all the money away.
Yeah.
Because the only reason they're getting that money is that they are shareholders in those companies and they are earning money from those companies.
Oh, that's the thing.
And there are millions of other shareholders around the world who are relying on those investments for their retirement income and propping up their own incomes and so on. So they're not just going to go, Bill Gates could just say, well, I'll sell Microsoft tomorrow. Mm-hmm. But Microsoft's still going to keep going. Somebody else is going to buy it.
Assuming someone can afford to.
Yeah, well, exactly. So,
Amazon will.
Well, that's Amazon or Apple. Yeah, or Google or Facebook.
Far out. Good episode, Dad.
Yeah, cheers.
Cheers.
Salt, I'll be coming down the road looking for sponsorship.
Alrighty, you mob, thank you so much for listening to or watching this episode of The Goss. If you would like to watch the video, if you're currently listening to it and not watching it, you can do so on the Aussie English TV channel on YouTube. This is different from the main channel. You'll be able to subscribe to that. Just search Aussie English TV on YouTube. And if you're watching this and not listening to it, you can check this episode out also on the Aussie English podcast, which you can find via my free Aussie English podcast application on both Android and iPhone. You can download that for free, or you can find it via any other good podcast app that you've got on your phone. Spotify, podcasts from iTunes, Stitcher, whatever it is. I'm your host, Pete. Thank you so much for joining me. I hope you have a ripper of a day, and I will see you next time. Peace!